Hello everyone, welcome to a new chess video. Today you're about to discover the liar's gambit. It's a gambit I recently discovered and it blew my mind. I've studied it thoroughly so I can share it with all of you and so you can enjoy it as much as I do. And not only that, but so you can start winning lots of games thanks to it. Also, it's a gambit that comes after the two moves d4 and d5. That is, these are very popular moves as you know, so you'll be able to play it in a ton of games. That's why I like it so much, because of that and because it's so spectacular. By the way, let's do a challenge and see if you like this video. Since I'm making this video for you for free, how about you leave me a nice like and let's see if we can reach 500 likes. That might seem like very little to you because you're used to watching really big YouTubers, but I prefer to have a small audience, but one that's the best. So if you leave me a nice like before we get started, I'll truly be grateful to you forever. Alright, now let's get started with this brutal gambit. I'm starting with a move we've already seen on the channel, the move e4. We've seen this in some other gambits, but this time it won't be the same as always. It's going to be a very novel gambit. Why are you giving away such an important pawn, chess teacher? On the second move, yes I know, we've always been taught not to give away material, especially not a central pawn. Well, this is what's great about a gambit. A gambit means we give up material in exchange for having much more attacking chances than our opponent. So, when they capture this pawn, how should we respond? Well, we should respond by attacking it with this knight. Notice something, if your opponent gets careless here and plays a move that doesn't defend this pawn, we simply recapture it, and look, we've already recovered the material. However, what's most common is that they defend this pawn. And if I ask you, let's see, a normal developing move to defend this pawn, the usual thing is that you tell me, for example, right? Knight to f6. To me, that seems like a completely normal move. It would also be very normal, some of you surely thought of this, bishop to f5. And I also think that's a perfectly good move, okay? Knight to f6 is used much more often, so let's start with this one here. What we're going to do is basically play as if it were a Spanish opening, but in reverse. If you don't know what the Spanish opening is, don't worry. It's this move here, but in reverse, we do it on the other side. Why is this move so interesting? Well, we're attacking this pawn, which is defended by a knight. So if this knight is the one defending, we're going to attack this knight. So what should black do? Well, they need to defend this pawn again. Why? Because if it were our turn again, we would capture this knight, and when they recapture, then we could recapture this pawn because its defender would no longer be there. That's why it's so important that when we play this bishop here, they defend this pawn again with this move. I say with this move here because notice that there is no other move, no other way to defend it. With the queen, it wouldn't be possible because we have the knight. So bishop to f5 is the only possible move. And now how are we going to continue? Well, you probably won't expect this move because it's a bit unusual, but it's a star move in the gambit. We're going to place the queen on e2. The main reason we're doing this is to keep attacking this point. We're attacking with the knight and we're attacking with the queen. It looks like we're attacking with 2 and they're defending with 2, but in reality they're only defending with 1 because we can take out this knight whenever we want. Now, I'm sure all of you are thinking, come on chess teacher, you're going crazy. Now there's a very easy way to defend this pawn by capturing this pawn that you just left hanging when you move the queen. Look how easy that is. I take this pawn and on top of that I defend this pawn with 3 pieces. So what happened here, chess teacher? Have you gone crazy? And what do I always tell you? Obviously I do go crazy, but that's because this works. Now, when the opposing queen comes to actively capture this vulnerable pawn, we're simply going to strategically come here to deliver this crucial check and simultaneously attack the bishop, a very effective double attack. Notice one important thing. When we precisely played queen to a2, our primary goal was never, ever to capture this specific square here, which is precisely what everyone mistakenly thinks. Our goal is to come through here. That's why, when they capture this pawn, which they'll do in 90% of cases, they've lost the game after this spectacular move. Check, and we take the bishop. However, many of you are probably thinking, come on chess teacher, now you really are losing your mind, because if it's check and I attack the bishop, I can simply defend it with my own bishop. But here, you're missing the fact that we're also attacking this square right here. We capture this pawn and now, friends, yes, friends, both male and female, we are attacking this rook which seems very difficult to defend. They can't bring the queen here, defended by the knight because our knight is in the way. But they do have this move here. You might say that the bishop here defends everything, but in this case, we could sneak in here and practically deliver checkmate. The problem is they have this queen that can come back to block. So this move wouldn't be as good as it seems. What should we do, chess teacher? If I can't capture the rook and I can't go in for checkmate, don't worry, because this queen, no matter how much they attack her, is not going to move from here since we have the brilliant pin with the bishop. Notice that right now this bishop absolutely cannot capture the queen because it is completely pinned to its very own king. Okay. So the only possible move that truly saves the entire position and effectively defends this crucial bishop is to come here. With the queen interposing, right? They block with the queen, they block the bishop, and this is where they want us to trade queens. Why? Because they have an extra pawn. However, now that the queen is no longer here, we can slip in and deliver this checkmate, where the king can't escape from here. We'll start by playing d4. This is the move you should start with to play the gambit. And almost always they reply with d5. If not, well, we can try to do it a little later, but the trap. As such, it works with d4, d5, alright? We'll play d4, giving up a super important pawn, and now we're going to attack it with the knight. You need to remember this. You already know it's very easy to remember these traps because, as you can watch the videos as many times as you need, if you forget, you just watch it again, and that's it. Super easy, just save the video, and that's it. We attack this pawn. They defend it either with the knight or with the bishop. No problem, because now we're going to attack the knight. They're going to defend it with the bishop. They have to do this. Why? I go through it so quickly. Because if they don't do this, we would simply recover the material. Okay? That's why it's most common for them to defend that pawn so they don't lose material. Star move here. Do you remember or not? Queen to e2. Is queen to e2 mainly to attack this pawn and recover material? No. That's what they think. But no. Our main objective is, no matter how much we give up another pawn, we want to come here to give a check, attack the bishop, and take this pawn here. Obviously, their only option is to bring the bishop, because any other option, for example, blocking the check, we would take the bishop, and that would be too much of a material advantage, right? So we directly calculate coming here. When we capture this pawn, which we must capture, okay? It's the only move that gives us the advantage, capturing this pawn when they defend with the bishop. So notice that there's no other way but to bring the bishop here, because if, for example, they come with the knight, we would take the rook. That's why all of these are forced moves. What does forced moves mean? Studying forced moves means those moves that the opponent has to make no matter what. That's why these gambits are so effective, because we already know which moves our opponent must make no matter what. Alright? Now, when they play bishop to c6, what were we going to do? Pin this bishop with the move bishop to b5. And now we've seen that this move was a disaster because we could sneak in and deliver mate. But there are other moves, for example, queen to d7, continuing to defend against mate. So first we exchange this bishop here. This is important. And now they have two options. If they capture with the queen, it's checkmate again. Look at these attacks. If they capture with the knight, we take the rook. So they can't capture with either the queen or the knight. And if they don't capture this bishop, they would simply be losing the queen because of the pin. What does this mean? That queen to d7 is a move, actually a disastrous move. Queen to d6 would be checkmate, and queen to d7 is also a disaster because of the bishop, So what other options do black have? Of course, you might say, if I move the queen, I lose no matter where I move it. So, well, look, I'll let them take this rook and at least I'll capture this bishop. I only lose the exchange, I have an extra pawn, nothing really happens. But actually here, we're not going to capture the rook. Instead, we're going to recapture this bishop with the knight. Very important, remember this. If I come here with the bishop and they capture my bishop, I recapture with the knight. And now the threat is tremendous, they can't do anything. I attack the queen, and not only that, but I also attack this point here. And not only that, but I also attack the rook as well. And many of you will say, well, there's a move that seems to defend almost everything, which is this one. Well, this defends the rook. But we always have this move here, check, and we take the queen. And not only that, but we have a brutal checkmate. And what would this checkmate look like? We simply come here to give check. They have to block with the queen. And then we would jump with the knight to give check. Neither the knight nor the queen can be captured. The knight can't be captured because the queen is pinned. And the queen can't be captured because of the knight. The one giving check, amazing, isn't it? Okay, this is very important. When they capture this central pawn, we play the knight, they play the knight, we come to attack, and now, super important, we play queen to e2. What happens if they don't capture this pawn, chess teacher? Because you're basing the whole video on them capturing that pawn. But well, it's very likely that they won't capture it because they've seen this check here. That's fine. It's very likely and it can happen. For example, they might play e6, directly defending this bishop. It's true, that's a much better move. However, I'm also going to show you how to punish that. By the way, I've sometimes received comments saying the following: these videos don't work because if they play perfectly, they beat us. Look, this is very important, okay? If they always play perfectly against us, they're going to win. Always. Alright? Only machines are capable of playing perfectly. So these videos are meant to teach you how to punish your opponent's mistakes. If your opponent makes this mistake, you'll know how to punish it. And it can also help you a lot to avoid making these mistakes yourself. So these videos are actually much more useful than you might think. I've won a lot of chess tournaments throughout my life. And I promise you, learning this is extremely useful. Alright? So, now let's get back to what's important. What happens if they figure out that we've played queen to a2 to come here and not to recapture the pawn, and they play, for example, the 6, right? Well, that's great. First of all, let me tell you that now, since we've protected this and haven't come over here, you'll always be able to recover the material whenever you want, for example, by bishop takes knight, and when they recapture, we take this pawn. Why? Because now, as you know, we have two pieces attacking and only one defending this knight, so we can eliminate it whenever we want. Perfect. Besides that, I think there are much better moves than just capturing this knight, and I'm going to show you which ones I think are better. We'll start with castling long. Look, a castle where the rook is already placed on the same file as the queen, a super powerful file. So now, seeing that they're left, for example, in this pin that's so aggressive against their knight, notice that this knight will never be able to move because of the queen. The queen is also around here. Well, it's a very logical move, right? It's to develop this bishop to e7. Notice that it blocks the pin and doesn't really have any better squares, because here it doesn't attack anything either, right? There's no pin or anything. Bishop to e7 is by far the most commonly played move. So then, what could you do here? Could you do the same thing again, capturing this knight and then capturing this pawn? Without a doubt, whenever you find yourself lost in this gambit, you can recover the pawn and end up with the same material as at the start, plus a good attack. However, as I said, there are much better moves. In this case, we're going to continue with the gambit line. We're going to play f3. Now black is going to be rubbing their hands together. Why? Because they were thinking, at first I want an extra pawn, everything seemed very simple, but they can take it back whenever they want. And when we play f3, they've seen the light. Because they can exchange this pawn, get rid of the extra pawn they had, and simply when we recapture it, well, we've just traded pawns, and black is left with an extra pawn. So, how are we going to get this pawn back? Well, with the knight. We want to develop our knight in exchange for losing this pawn, which is what a gambit is. We sacrifice a pawn in exchange for having much more initiative and a much stronger attack. Black is ready to castle, for example, but it's already too late because we have a very well-coordinated attack. Notice, don't just memorize the moves, but rather remember the attack plan. Right now, what is the attack plan? Well, we have a spectacular attack against the opponent's castled king. For example, with these two pawns. I'm telling you, you won't even notice you're a pawn down when you launch the attack because it's impossible. Alright? How is our attack going to start? In this case, with knight to e5, a super strong move. What am I aiming for with knight to e5? I'm not trying to threaten anything because notice that it doesn't threaten anything. Thank you. But rather to place a knight in an excellent position so we can advance our pawns while they're supported, launching a truly spectacular attack on the king. Also, there isn't any pawn that can threaten this knight. They can only threaten it with the other knight, but we don't care. Whatever they do, we play this move here. A super powerful move that attacks the bishop. You might say, well, can they exchange this knight? No. That's a mistake, a very serious mistake, because when you recapture, you unleash a discovered attack on the queen, attacking the knight, attacking the bishop, and here they're going to lose a lot of material. So right now, they wouldn't be able to recapture the knight. Well then, sorry, if they can't recapture the knight, how should they continue? Well, obviously by moving this bishop away, they have no other choice. And by moving this bishop away, we're going to come in with this other pawn. Look at what a brutal attack this is. We're launching on the queen side. We're carrying out a devastating attack on the castled king, and not just on the castling. Now, if they get distracted and make any move, like this one for example, we would simply win the bishop because it can't go anywhere. Notice that here we also have the knight and the queen. So here, there's only one move that works, which is this one right here. It leaves a space open for the bishop, and not only that, but it also attacks our bishop. But this is already a serious mistake. Why? Because they're weakening themselves too much. How could things continue? Well, we would simply capture this bishop here with the knight, forcing them to recapture the knight because we're also attacking the rook. So when they recapture, notice the weakness that's been created here. This pawn has moved, we can come in to check with the queen, and this would already be terrifying for the black pieces. Notice that now they can't capture here because it's check. They would have to move the king aside. And when they move the king aside, notice that we have such a strong attack with all our pieces coordinated. That's what's important, and that's why we sacrifice the pawn to have a much stronger attack. And notice right now, do you really care about being a pawn down? First, we've already gotten it back, and second, look at our bishops, our queen, our pawns, our rooks. We are completely winning. Here, the black pieces can't do absolutely anything. Look, there was a game. If you want, I'll show you how to punish this quickly. They played this move here to try to save themselves. I looked up if there was any game with exactly these moves, and if there was one, for example, in this one, they tried to defend with this move and simply pushed this pawn forward. Why? Because if they capture the bishop, it would simply be checkmate over here. So this bishop is completely untouchable. It's a bishop that can't be captured. In this case, they brought the knight here to try to defend and attack the queen, but notice that this is absolutely useless. The attack is completely lethal. No matter how much they try to attack our queen, we have much better moves. In this case, for example, what would that move be? Capture this pawn here with our pawn, thus giving a check to the king. They can't capture because it would be checkmate soon, so they have to move the king instead, and then the sacrifice comes here. We sacrifice even more pieces, and no matter how much they capture, we can bring in the rook, and this would already be checkmate. Take a look. What a brutal way to punish this enemy king. And now I'll go over two typical mistakes that black makes when we play this gambit. I'll review them quickly because they're very easy to punish. And after these two mistakes, I'll also show you a very similar trap with the black pieces that you can use as well, okay? So first of all, when they capture here and we come here, as you know, we should bring out the bishop. Now we've seen that this was a mistake, right? So what about playing knight to c6? A normal developing move, saying, well, I'm not going to defend this pawn because I know you'll recover it whenever you want. Chess teacher, can I now capture this knight, as you've mentioned several times in this video, and when they recapture, take this pawn? Of course. I've already told you one thing. Whenever you think, oh, I don't know how to continue, you can recover the pawn by capturing this knight and then capturing here. And on top of that, you'll have a strong center. However, there are better options, all right? For example, if they play knight to c6, a better option is to play d5, attacking this knight very strongly. Notice that when it moves here, for example, we can bring the queen, attacking the knight and attacking the pawn with two pieces. There won't even be a need to capture this knight, and we'll have a much better position. For example, later by castling long, if they come this way, we castle long and put tremendous pressure. And our position is much better than our opponents. Simply with one pawn down, and not only that. But we can recover the pawn whenever we want, and on top of that, we'll have equal material and a much stronger attack. And a very common mistake when playing this gambit, before all of this, notice, okay? Here we've attacked the pawn, they defend it with the knight, but not before all this, but rather right at the beginning, attacking the pawn, they defend it with another pawn. At first glance, this already seems like a bad move, but you need to know how to punish it, okay? A very valid option is to apply the principles I've explained to you, playing f3, capturing here and developing the knight. We would have a much better position with this black pawn here, which is completely out of place. But there's an option that I love and that has helped me win a lot of games. Placing this bishop here, tempting our opponent to threaten it, and it looks like they've got it well trapped, right? So here, they've already lost the game after the move queen to h5 check, and notice how the king is extremely weakened along this diagonal. Now, since they've moved this pawn, they can't defend themselves with this pawn, which would have been very easy to defend. With this pawn here, they're forced to move the king over here. Look at how ugly this position is. There's no way to escape from here. For example, we can continue with bishop to c4, putting pressure along this diagonal. In fact, they'll never be able to take this bishop, because then we'd capture their rook. So this would be completely won for us. And now, to finish on a high note, I'm going to show you how to use a little trap with the black pieces that's very similar to the one we've just done with the white pieces. You're going to love it. Let's go. And now we've reached the final trap with the black pieces, which is very similar, and I'm sure you've seen it before. It's when they play d4 against you. We're going to play e5 right away, giving up the pawn, and when they capture it, we'll attack it with the knight. Notice that here they have two options to defend it, with the knight and with the bishop. Just like what we've seen with the black pieces. By the way, before I forget, please, if you've made it to the end of the video, remember that I put a lot of effort into these videos. Leave a big like and any supportive comment is really appreciated, honestly, because you only see the final result. You sit down and it looks perfect, but there's a lot of work behind it, okay? Thank you all so much. Here they can defend the pawn with two options, knight to f3 or even bishop to f4. It doesn't matter to us. whatever they do, because if they play knight to f3, for example, first, now we'll attack with the queen, and notice that the only option now is with the other piece. So the order doesn't matter. And here we've already won the game with the same move. We come here, not because we wanted to recover the pawn, but because we wanted to give this check, win this bishop, and capture here. A very similar trap with the black pieces. What did you think? Did you like it? Remember that if you love this video and you like the channel, you have this channel available, as well as the digital channel. You already know we have 2 channels with daily videos, so you can subscribe to whichever you like best, or to both if you really enjoy them, alright? And you'll get daily videos on both this channel and the digital channel, Chess Teacher and Chess Teacher Digital. I hope you loved this video. I really enjoyed making it, and I'll see you in the next video, friends. Goodbye.